Today's topic is EnGenius switch solution, which is our hybrid switch solution. It's a newer switch line that we've put out in the market about a year ago, but it's newer to a lot of individuals. So what I'll do is I'll talk about our switch solution as a whole, what you kind of get within the solution itself. We'll talk a little bit about management. I'll actually go into our cloud interface. That's one of the management pieces, and just show you how to register a device really quick, a switch specifically. So I'll try to show you that today. Then we'll go into the hardware, the different options that you have for the different environments that you go into. And then I'll follow up with the advantages that we see within the market, the advantages with EnGenius that we see against the market or against our competitors. And then we are running a promotion. I'll also talk about that. So let's go ahead and get started. So the switch solution. So these switches, which are hybrid switches, they're network inclusive. So you can place these switches in any environment and they will just simply work. If you want to place it into an EnGenius network, obviously it's going to work, but if you want to place it in Aruba, a Ruckus, a Ubiquiti network, or a Cambium network, these switches will work no problem. They can work in multiple modes, and that's why it's a hybrid switch. It can work in autonomous mode or a standalone mode. So it will work in any network that you need a layer 2 switch. Okay, so all of these switches that we'll be talking about are layer 2 plus switches. So if you're currently using layer 2 switches, these are the switches that you can use. As we'll talk further, there are PoE and non-PoE switches and different variances of those switches. But your common layer 2 features, obviously 1Q, VLAN tagging, link aggregation, mirroring, DHCP relay. So there's a multiple things obviously that are on the switch. We say layer 2 plus because there are some layer 3 features. So you do have some abilities there, but these are traditionally layer 2 with some layer 3 features. What we've done is, these switches typically go into a small, medium-sized business. We typically design our switches around 3 main markets. That's wireless networking, that's voice over IP, and that's surveillance. Those are the 3 main markets that we typically go into, and that's how we design our switches to fit in those particular markets. So you'll see features in those in these switches for those particular areas, and we'll talk a little more about that as we move forward. So we have multiple options, anywhere from a 10 gigabit switch to a multi-gigabit switch, and we'll dive in deeper on individual hardware, the hardware spec a little more to give you an idea of like what options we do have. But we do support 10 gigabit options, multi-gig options, and obviously gigabit options. You can actually, the beauty of multi-gig and 10 gig, you can actually use the existing cabling infrastructure and a lot of these buildings that you're deploying in or offices that you're deploying in, as long as they're using beyond Cat5. So if they're using Cat5e, for example, or Cat6, you can actually take advantage of multi-gig or 10 gig. So by simply just updating the switch infrastructure or the fabric, you can actually see higher speeds across the existing cable as long as it's Cat5e or Cat6. To give you an example, that Cat5.6 obviously, or excuse me, Cat5e as an example, will give you up to a gigabit up to 100 meters or 328 feet, somewhere around there. Cat5e will actually support 10 gigabit Ethernet up to 45 meters. Cat6, you can see 10 gigabit Ethernet up to 55 meters. So using existing Cat6 or Cat5e, you can already achieve higher speeds than 1 gigabit using these switches. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're deploying with your the different customers and different environments that you go into. So you can take advantage of that. And we're starting to see more and more 10 gigabit deployments and multi-gig deployments. The demand for these switches we're starting to see higher and higher demand for these. So these are two options that you want to definitely consider: 10 gig and multi-gig. We also support 802 AF, also 802 AT, and 802.3BT. So 802 AF obviously is power over Ethernet. That's up to 15.4 watts. 802.3 AT is up to 30 watts. And 802.3 BT, type 3 specifically, is up to 60 watts. So that's PoE, PoE plus, and PoE plus plus. So the difference with EnGenius is we supply PoE on our PoE switches, obviously. We supply PoE on every port. It's not the first 4 ports, not the first 8, not the first 16 or 12. It's on every port. You can supply PoE, and obviously the ports are auto sensing, so it will detect what is at the end and what power consumption that device needs, and provide that bandwidth. So what we typically see is smart technology used in student housing, condominiums, or multifamily units, assisted living, for example. The power budgets per switch, per port, are really on high demand. So our 10 gig and our multi-gig PoE switches, like I said, they support up to 60 watts or PoE plus plus on any port to support that growing demand. Some of the devices that would need that kind of power to power up, there are some Wi-Fi 6 access points that need more than AT compliancy. Wi-Fi 6E, the newer Wi-Fi that's coming out, which will operate on 6 gigahertz, the power consumption of those devices will need more power. So you have to also consider AV controllers, video phones, PTZ cameras, digital signage, and lighting. So these are some of the devices that you have to consider when you're trying to power them up. What are the power budgets of the switches, and what can you what the ports can maximize on? Is it 30 watts, 60 watts? Is it 15.4? So you have to know if it's a PoE, PoE plus, or PoE plus plus, and we offer all three in different variations. So we do see this demand more and more, and so we have options for that to meet that demand, basically. Some new features that we'll see this month, or excuse me, in February, I should say, I'm already in February, are really specifically for surveillance. And so these, what we call, these are surveillance features. Surveillance is definitely growing, as a lot of people know. A lot of the customers that we work with install surveillance. So we do see this as a very important market, and to provide features, extra features in those particular markets. 3 features that will be coming out is PoE extended mode. And PoE extended, when it's in that operation mode, it provides up to 250 meters. Typical PoE is 100 meters, so 328 feet. We're extending it. We can now extend it to 250 meters, which is about 825 feet, 826 feet. So we're able to extend the length of the cable to a surveillance camera, for example. So PoE extended mode, we will see that ability in February. We'll also have PD Lifeguard, or Power Device Lifeguard. This function can monitor the connected powered device like an IP camera, for example. And it measures or looks at the status in real time. We do it via pinging or LDDP action. If the power device stops responding, the switch will restart the PoE port to bring that device back up. So PD Lifeguard is one of those features that will be added in February timeframe as well. Continuous PoE, power to the powered device. So what continuous power over Ethernet is, or continuous PoE, is it delivers continuous PoE to a PoE camera, for example. Even when the switch is goes into a maintenance or a firmware update, it continues the power to the actual device. So the device will never power down on the end. So if the switch goes through a firmware update, that device continues to be powered on, and if it does have onboard storage, it will continue to record video as well. So these are 3 new features that will launch in February on 2 new switches that are coming up and will be added to our additional lineup, and we'll talk a little more about as we go along. But 3 new features specifically around surveillance. I really wanted to highlight that and make sure everybody knew this was coming. I would say 95% of our switches have some sort of uplink port. A majority of them within this lineup are 10 gigabit or SFP plus. So you can receive up to 10 gigabit uplink ports on a majority of the switches. There's only 2 variances or 2 form factors that don't have SFP plus, and we'll talk about those as we go on. But all of our switches have some sort of uplink port except for one. And we'll talk about that when I go into the kind of the hardware review side of things. So let's talk about management a little bit. At the beginning, what I was describing is our switches are basically a hybrid switch. And so this switch can obviously work in a standalone mode or autonomous mode, we like to call it, where you can log into the switch in itself and you can configure the switch and you can put that switch into any network. But it can also be managed with our on-premises management system, which is EasyMaster or SkyKey. It can be managed that way, or it can be managed via the cloud. A lot of our customers that are using these switches are using cloud, but you do have those options. I do have surveillance companies using these switches without using the management side of things. And a lot of them are starting to move into, okay, we want to do a lot more remote configuration, so we want to get into more cloud management. And so these switches are all hybrid switches. So all the switches that we talk about in the hardware review side, they're hybrid switches, so they can be managed in a multiple of ways. So I just want you to keep that in mind when you consider and look at these switches, that they have these different options. The one option that I will dive into is the cloud side. I am the product line manager for EnGenius for cloud, specifically the cloud lineup, and that consists of these switches that we're talking about today. And so you can actually manage and monitor our switches via the cloud or Cloud to Go app, the mobile app. It's actually very easy. It allows you to do a lot of things, and a lot of questions that we get around surveillance or voice over IP, more so with surveillance, is what can you do remotely? What are my capabilities to remotely change things? And so we have a lot of things, and I listed a couple of things that typically come up, but we'll actually go ahead and go into the app just after this, after I talk about this, and I'll show you how to register one of our cloud AP, or excuse me, switches, and you can take a look at the interface really quick as well. So some of the things that we can do is we can do group configurations, or group, what we call as pre-configurations. You can actually make configuration files prior to onboarding any switch that you want to manage via the cloud. So you can actually make group pre-configurations. Then you can go back and do individual configurations. You can fine tune the individual switches. If they have different VLANs, you can set up different VLANs for different ports, for different port densities of switches. So there's a lot that you can do there. You can also disable power per port. So if you do need to reboot a particular device at the other end and you want to do it immediately, you can actually do that through the cloud portal, or you can do it through the Cloud to Go mobile app. The other thing that you can do is disable data per port. You can do rate limiting per port. You can actually set up and modify VLANs via the cloud portal or Cloud to Go app. You can disable the local GUI, the local graphical user interface of the switch. So if you're drop shipping your switches to a particular client and you don't want them to have access into the switch, you can disable the local GUI. You can also change the local credentials. So you can actually make the changes within the cloud and say, okay, I want the admin to be this and I want the password to be this, and then have it shipped or drop shipped to a particular area. When the device comes online, it takes on those configurations, and so you can't log in with the default admin and password of the switch. So you're basically kind of remotely locking it for the time being until you get everything set up, and then you can allow your clients to gain access into those switches when they need to. A feature that's coming, that's why it has an asterisk on it, is PoE scheduling. That will be added, I believe, in February. So we will be adding PoE scheduling, and in addition to some of the other things that we're just adding, the other 3 features I just talked about. So these are some of the features that you can do remotely, and there's a lot more. So what I will do is I will go into the cloud interface really quick. And so just bear with me. So I've logged into EnGenius Cloud. I'll actually do it again. So, oh, not there. There, I'm gonna log in. I'm gonna log into the cloud interface. And so what we're looking at right now is my personal network, and this is in the cloud. So what we're going to do is just look at switches. So this is my dashboard. This is a network health check, and then a list of my switches, my access points, and my clients on my particular network. We're only going to look at switches in this webinar. I'm going to click on switches, and it's going to show me the available switches. And so right now I'm running a 10 gigabit switch at my home. And if I just click on the line here, it will give me a quick glimpse of this switch, what ports are being utilized. And so this switch obviously is being cloud managed. So this is one of the management options that you have when you use the EnGenius hybrid switches. And so we're managing it via the cloud. So you can see that I can look at the ports, what's available, what's being used, what speeds that they're negotiated at, if I have any VLAN set up, the power budget that's currently being used. I'm using 8.7 watts of 420 watts on this particular switch, and some configurations there. So I can look at the switch at a high level, or I can click on this little action button here, which is details. It will allow me to dive into the switch in itself. I can reboot the switch if I want to, or I can do what is called a replace. A replace is a function where I can actually, if this switch were having issues, I can replace it with a new one and dump these configurations on the new switch. And I can do that by just clicking through this button and looking at my inventory and taking the configs from here and adding it to a new switch. What I'm going to do is do details, and I'm going to dive in further into this particular switch that's on my network. And so now we're looking at the switch, the 10 gigabit switch. I can rename this if I want to. High level information on the switch itself. I can look at summary, port, total PoE usage right now by port. On port 2, I'm using 8.7 watts. My IP addressing, my VLAN setup. I can set up my VLANs here, and I can also take a picture of the switch if I want to know, oh, this is in this particular rack in the conference room, so I would take a picture of that particular switch there. I can go into system settings. These are high-level group settings where I can do group configurations. I can configure per port if I need to. I can select ports, simply click configure, and go into individual ports and configure those ports. This is where I can disable and enable power on the PoE and set budgets. If I want to reboot the device that's connected, I can do mirroring, link aggregation, and I can look at logs. And so this is really a quick high-level view of what switches look like within our cloud interface or management interface. What I wanted to show you really quick is how to register a device, or how to start managing a switch via the cloud. And so basically I will go to this little building icon, which is called organization, go to inventory, and under inventory, I can simply just click register, and I can put in my serial number. All of our cloud switches or hybrid switches have a QR code on the bottom of them, and you can simply scan that QR code with an app, and that will onboard your switch, and you can start managing the switch. So what I'm going to do is show you through the app. I'm going to log into the EnGenius Cloud app, and I'm simply looking at the dashboard for this network that we were just looking at. And you can see I have 2 APs and 1 switch. I'm going to add a switch. So there's a little plus button at the bottom. I'm going to hit that button, and I'm going to say register device. It's going to use my camera on my phone. And you can see this is the switch that we're using. And I'm gonna scan that device and register the device. It's asking me to rename it. I'm just going to leave it the model name and assign it. I'm going to assign it to a network. So I have multiple networks. I'm going to assign it to my network, apply. And then I'm not going to change it. I'm going to leave it and assign it to this network. Once it's assigned to a network, it will pull any configurations I have on that particular network. So I'm going to finish setup, and I can register more switches if I want to, or I can just finish. I'm going to click finish. Now I'm back. And so what I'll do is I'll keep this up while this is also running. I'll do a refresh. We should see it populate. So there we have the other switch, the ECS 1008P, and it's assigned to the network. So all I would have to do now is physically plug this into a LAN port that's connected to a WAN. It's going to reach out to the cloud and pull configurations and do a firmware update. So you can actually it will do automatic firmware updates when you first plug in the switch. That's the other benefit to this is you can do auto firmware updates on a schedule, or you can force them right away. It just really depends, and you can receive alerts on switches through this method. So what I'll do is I'll show you what the switch interface looks like really quick. So I'll go into the 10 gigabit switch that we were just looking at, just to give you an idea. This is through my mobile device, and this is the type of management I can do through the mobile device. I can go to the VLAN settings. I can add new VLANs. I can do port settings. I can configure ports if I want to. There's multiple things that I can do: IP ranges, management, VLANs. There's some high-level configurations I can do. I can do a replace function, reboot. I can look at real-time meters. Real-time meters is actually tell me the actual CPU usage, the memory usage. So it just gives you a lot of capabilities. And this is only one of the management options that you can use within the EnGenius hybrid switches. So if I go back to dashboard, you'll see that I have two switches now. One is offline because I just need to plug that in and it will come online. And then I have two switches on my network and I can start managing that particular switch. So that was a really quick look at one way of managing these switches. Again, these are hybrid switches, so they can be managed in multiple ways. So let's talk about hardware. So we have multiple hardware options. As I mentioned, we have 10 gig and multi-gig switches. This is our lineup for 10 gig and multi-gig. We have 4 8-port form factors in the 10 gig and multi-gig section. We will be adding 24-port and 48-port 10 gigabit switches. That's coming in the near future. I want to say end of Q2 timeframe. Of these 4, you have 2 PoE and 2 non-PoE. The 2 on the left are 10 gigabit switches, 1 PoE and 1 non-PoE. You have 10 gigabits on each of the ports. So you can choose any port, it's going to be 10 gigabit. That's true for the PoE and non-PoE version. The PoE version has 420 watts of power, and it can supply up to 60 watts per port. You just choose any port, and it's going to auto sense that device at the other end. The non-PoE, 10 gigabit on any of the ports. You'll notice that we have SFP plus uplink ports on both of these switches. And then we have 2 multi-gig switches. You can get 2.5 gigabits per port on both. The major difference is this is a PoE and this is a non-PoE. You have 240 watts to play with this particular switch. It also offers up to 60 watts per port. You just choose any port and it will power a device up. It will auto sense that device and supply the appropriate power. And then you have a non-PoE version. Both of these have SFP plus ports on both those devices. We have PoE and non-PoE gigabit switch options as well, anywhere from a 48 port and all the way down to 24 port. What you're looking at here are PoE versions and non-PoE versions, and there's a mixture of different PoE budgets. We have the ECS 1552 FP, that's one of our most popular switches, and the 1528 FP, which is another popular unit. That's our 24 port and our 48 port. The ECS 1552 FP supplies up to 740 watts. It provides PoE plus, so up to 30 watts per port, any port. It's a 48 port, full featured layer 2 plus switch. Has those 4 SFP plus ports on that particular switch. So a very popular version. Another popular version is the ECS 1528 FP. Has 410 watts, 24 port with 4 SFP plus ports on that particular device. So these are the most popular of all these switches, obviously, because these are just now coming out. These will come out in January. These are basically half power of what you're seeing with the its counterpart. And then we have a non-PoE 48 and a non-PoE 24 port. So currently have inventory on these particular devices, and so very popular switches that are being deployed within EnGenius networks and other networks. We have several small form factor switches. We have 2 8-port gigabit switches. Of these 2, I would say the 1112 FP, this first one here, right here, is the more popular. It's AT compliant. Has PoE plus, PoE plus on all the ports. It has fast Ethernet and SFP plus, or not SFP, not plus, but SFP uplink abilities. So you do have uplink options. 130 watts, 30 watt power budgets or per port on this particular switch. This is a AF switch, no uplink ports, 55 watt budget. So these are the 2 small form factor switches. This is rack mountable. This is more desktop version. And then we have 2 new switches coming very shortly. They're 4-port switches. I'm really excited about these 4-port switches. They're 4-port, but they're multi-gig. They're 2.5 gig per port. One variant has an uplink port of 110 gigabit copper uplink. It's a fanless design. And then we have another 4-port multi-gig fanless, but no uplink port. So we'll have 2 variations coming in end of actually May, around April-May timeframe for these 2 switches, and we'll have more switches coming to fill out our switch lineup. So you'll see more and more coming from us in the near future on hardware selection. So this is the current lineup that we have for our switches. Some advantages with the EnGenius switches I typically talk about when I'm talking with customers what they're looking for. We offer 10 gigabit, multi-gig, gigabit on all ports. It's not the first 4, the first 2, the first 8, the first 12, 16. It's across the board on every port. If you're buying a 10 gigabit switch, all the ports will supply 10 gigabit. If you're buying a 2.5 gigabit switch, you will see that on every port. Another benefit is we have a very wide PoE budget for different environments and different devices that you need to power up, anywhere from 740 watts all the way down to 55 watts. So you're getting, you have options for PoE++, which is 802.3 BT, or you have PoE+, which is AT, and then you have AF, which is PoE. So 60 watts, 30 watts, or 15.4 watts, all compliant. The PoE is available on every port. Your limitations to the budget. So you have to look at the budgets and see what the budgets are on the particular switches, and then you can make your judgment call, or you can design around that and choose the right switch for your solution. Again, up to 60 watts per port. A majority of our switches, all but 2, have 4 dual speed 10 gigabit SFP plus uplink ports. Again, these are hybrid switches, so they can be managed either by the cloud in a standalone mode, using EasyMaster as an on-premises management system that we have, or a SkyKey, which is a small device that can manage those particular devices. Or if you're using SNMP, for example, you can manage it that way. So there's multiple ways to manage these switches. They're hybrid switches. They're network inclusive, so they will go into any network. I didn't talk about this in the cloud, but in the cloud, that management, you can do real-time chat with us, but better yet, you can actually request remote assistance, and you can actually allow us into your cloud account for a set time. Say it's an hour, say it's all the way to 7 days, and we'll go in and we'll help you troubleshoot if you need help troubleshooting different things within the cloud. So we do have real chat, didn't talk about that, in the cloud, and remote assistance within the cloud. And it's simply, there's a team of us that monitor that chat system and that remote assistance. All of these switches have a 2-year warranty. So you're getting a 2-year warranty, and all these switches are priced pretty aggressively. They're priced about right, and you can obviously check with Streakwave on your pricing, and they'll be more than happy to let you know what that is. The biggest thing I would say is our switch line, the cloud switch line, is basically, it's only for the approved partners. So it's for approved distributors and approved partners. So you have to be an approved distributor and a partner to be able to buy and resell and install these particular switches. So Streakwave obviously is a approved partner of ours. We've had long relationships with Streakwave, so they're approved partner of ours, approved distributor, and they work with a lot of customers that are approved partners. So you have to be approved partner, to be able to buy these switches. And obviously the line's protected, so you won't see it online. We're not selling it direct, for example. Very protected line. We understand that system integrators, managed service providers, VARs need margin. So that's why it's a protected line, and we want to make sure that you have that. So you have to be a certified dealer, VAR, to be able to use these particular devices. The other thing I'd like to bring up, and a question I get, these devices are NDAA compliant. So we are NDAA compliant. We're also TAA compliant. And we also will operate in a HIPAA environment. So that's another thing to bring up. We do work in a HIPAA environment. We've gone into a lot of assisted living and small doctor offices and so on, and in some hospitals. So we are HIPAA, we do fall in a HIPAA compliant environment. So just so you know. Hopefully I didn't miss anything there. So another advantage to EnGenius is not only do you have the Streakwave sales team that you can reach out to, but when you're looking and researching EnGenius and you have questions, pre and post sales questions or support, we have a whole team of people that will support you, and they're broken up by territories. So we have 5 sales representatives that can do pre and post sales, and they align with Streakwave sales teams. So you can actually work with your Streakwave salesperson. You can work with one of these particular sales reps. You have Doug Bowersox, who's one of our business development managers. He's responsible for Streakwave, and he works with Streakwave, and he can also help with pre and post sales questions, and he can direct you in the right direction. As well, these individuals can help you in the sales and the support side, get you in the right path of, okay, I need technical support, for example, or I need help with a very technical question on a switch. They can direct you on the right place and get you connected with the right person. So you do have this at your fingertips. So you have the Streakwave team. You have actually Mike Anderson. If you have not met Mike Anderson can support you. You also have Doug Bowersox, which is on our team, and then you have this team here that can also support you. So again, this will be sent to you, so you will have those that contact information to use in the future. Last but not least, what I would talk about is a promotion that we're running on our switches with Streakwave. So we're providing a buy one, get one free on a 48 port and a 24 port switch. When you buy the ECS 1552, which is a 48 port switch, gigabit switch, you can receive one for free. It's the same is true for the ECS 1528. When you buy one, you can get one free. It's a really simple process. Once you purchase that, you send your invoice to partners@engenius.com with the subject line free gigabit switch, and we'll ship you out a free switch from our office. So it's a buy one, get one free on a 48 port and a 24 port switch. And that's everything that I got for this particular webinar, and I want to thank everybody for their time. And if you have any questions, by all means, let me know, and I'll try to answer those questions.
Thanks, Brian. There was a question on the promo real quick. When does the promo end? They're asking if there's an end date.
Yeah, the end date is March timeframe. Okay. The end of March, I should say, not timeframe, but end of March.
Perfect. And going back to the compliant topic, are the devices NDAA and TAA compliant as well?
Yes, they are. Yeah, they're both NDAA compliant and TAA compliant. All of our devices are manufactured in Taiwan, designed here, manufactured in Taiwan. We're original manufacturer, equipment manufacturer, so we don't third party. We don't go to a third party and have them build it for us. We actually build our own products. That's all of our switches, all of our access points. We actually have a router coming out. The router will be built from us. So yeah, we're NDA compliant, TAA compliant, so they can go into those government type projects and so on.
Perfect, thank you. We just got a question in. They're asking, are there any plans for a 16 port switch?
Oh, that's a great question. There are talks about 16 port. Right now on the roadmap, we're 48 port, 24 port, which are two most popular. We've had multiple 16 requests. I know we're considering 16, but I know we're coming out. We have 8 port as well. We're kind of focusing in on the smaller form factors, the four ports, as I mentioned. So we have more 8 port, more 4 port. I'll try to let Mike know if there's a 16 port coming up, but there are talks of doing a 16 port. But great question. I'm excited about the 4 port multi-gig. That will do, I think, really, really well.
Well, speaking of that, they're asking when will that be available for the 4 port?
Yeah, so the 4 port will be available, I think it's May timeframe, the beginning of May, late April timeframe.
Okay, perfect. Another question, if there's any technical support issues, who do they contact for tech support?
Yeah, so let me go back to this screen. So if you want to reach out to EnGenius directly, I would say it would be one of these counterparts, depending on your territory. However, if you have a StreakWave rep, that StreakWave rep will know who to call, and that StreakWave rep will probably contact Doug, and Doug will funnel it to one of these particular people, or actually help with the question. So if there's a sales or support issue, then it would probably go to StreakWave, to Doug, and then to one of these individuals, and they'd probably reach out to you and help you or point you in the right direction. And what I mean by point you is have somebody contact you that would be able to help.
Awesome, thank you. Maybe just leave that screen up for a little bit. So
Yeah, I will.
have it. And then let's see here. We have a question is, do you have any SFP models?
Oh, the modules? Yeah, we do have SFP modules. Yep. We do. Yeah, we have multiple. We have 10 gigabit and 1 gigabit SFP modules. We're starting to build out more and more accessories for the switch lineup. Our switch, like I said, the switch line is growing, so we get a lot of requests for SFP modules. So yes, we do. What a new SFP module that's coming is a copper version rather than fiber. So we will have a copper SFP module come out here shortly. So keep an eye out for that. So that should be coming soon.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't see any other questions, so I wanted to say thank you for everyone's time for attending, and Brian for the presentation. Do look at StreakWave's website and see all of the items that we have in stock. Please take advantage of the promo that is going on. And again, thank you, Brian. If there's any last minute things that you wanted to address, please do so. Not,
yeah, just yep, I'll just thank everybody for showing up, and thanks for your attention. Hopefully it was helpful and you got a little more information in regards to our switches and our management. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to StreakWave or one of these individuals, and we'll try to help you out.
Great, thank you guys. Bye.